Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a world of gas lamps, rattling carriages, and sleepless Victorians desperately sipping something that smells suspiciously like boiled lawn clippings. You're wrapped in a shawl, huddled on a creaky chaise longue in a cold stone house. The fire's nearly out, the clock just struck 2, and once again, you're wide awake. Your bones ache from a long day scrubbing soot from chimney flues or working a shift in a textile mill. Maybe you're more refined than that. Perhaps you spent the day being corseted into silence or hunched over account ledgers under candlelight. Either way, your brain won't shut up. You're exhausted, but you're still chasing sleep like it owes you money. So what's the solution? Your kindly great aunt hands you a steaming bowl of lettuce soup. Not a hearty stew, not some rich bisque, just watery, faintly green sadness in porcelain. She insists it's the latest remedy from a pamphlet she read. Boiled lettuce, dear. It calms the nerves. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like the ghost of a salad. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far this sleepy little show reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You close your eyes and imagine being in the 1870s. No phone, no melatonin gummies, no blackout curtains. Your only options for battling insomnia are homemade tinctures, poorly researched advice, and a society that thinks being sleepy is either sinful or suspicious. At first, lettuce seems like an odd fix, but in this time, every kitchen and garden is part medicine cabinet. Your neighbor swears by cabbage tea. The butcher's wife recommends boiled dandelion. Somewhere along the line, someone reads that lettuce, specifically Lactuca sativa, has trace amounts of a substance that's vaguely sedative. So into the pot it goes. Add a little salt, maybe some milk. Historians still argue whether this particular lettuce soup fad originated with folk traditions or came from a burst of pseudoscientific plant lore circulating in cheap medical pamphlets. One account claims a London chemist started bottling lettuce sleep serum in 1868. Likely more branding than breakthrough. You lean against the window frame, spoon in hand, looking out at fog rolling over the cobblestones. Somewhere a dog barks, someone coughs 3 doors down, and you try to convince yourself this soup is doing something, anything, other than giving you bloating. A mainstream historical record from 1872 notes an increase in sleep-related complaints among middle-class urbanites, citing the nervous energies exhausted by modern life. What's modern life? Smoke-belching trains, clanking factory presses, and too many cups of afternoon tea. Your cousin Arthur claims lettuce helped him sleep like a babe. Of course, he also drinks a sherry nightcap, smokes opium on occasion, and never works before noon. Maybe it's not the soup. Maybe it's the Arthur. Still, you persist. You dutifully sip your way through the bowl, letting the warmth settle in your stomach like a soggy hug. You lie back, hoping, praying, pretending it's working. That's the real medicine here. Hope. There's a quirkiness in how seriously people take this. Victorian newspapers even run recipes for lettuce broth, describing it as a delicate digestive and sedative for overwrought ladies and exhausted clergymen. You wonder who had the nerve to lump those two into the same target market. Maybe you even try the cold version, lettuce water, which you prepare by soaking shredded leaves in tepid spring water, straining it, and drinking it with a sugar cube. It's faintly herbal, slightly bitter, and again, utterly useless unless your true ailment is an underwhelming palate. Anecdotes pile up, Some swear lettuce dreams are vivid. Others say it gives them stomach cramps. Some pamphlets insist on wild lettuce instead, the more pungent cousin known for its white latex sap, lactucarium, sometimes called lettuce opium. You wrinkle your nose. That one sounds a bit more serious. By now you realize something else is brewing beneath the soup surface. A deeper question. Why are so many Victorians so deeply tired? Why are there entire aisles of treatments for sleeplessness when everyone is working dawn to dusk and collapsing into bed? You push aside the empty bowl and tuck yourself into the rough wool sheets. The room is dim, the air still, and you're hoping the lettuce kicks in before the coal fire dies completely. Your feet are cold. Your thoughts are louder than ever. And yet, the doctors keep trying. They release little handbooks about how to cure insomnia. They prescribe camphor and valerian and sometimes arsenic. You'll get to that soon enough. But always the advice includes something about rest. As if that weren't the exact thing you're missing. Victorian culture ties a person's moral worth to their ability to rest appropriately. Too much sleep, lazy, too little, nervous and unstable, there's no winning. You sit in your attic room, surrounded by books you're not supposed to read, listening to the drip of a leaking pipe and wonder which category you fall into. What's funny is, for all the fuss, most people never ask why sleep is so hard to come by now. Maybe they're too scared of the answer. Maybe it's because their lives are too full of noise, of smog, of anxiety. Or maybe it's just that nobody teaches them how to rest anymore. There's no bedtime ritual, no wind-down routine. You just collapse when your body gives up. Except tonight your body hasn't given up, and neither have you. You pull the thin blanket higher over your shoulders and close your eyes again. One more try. You count backward from 100. You imagine waves on a beach, horses in a meadow, Queen Victoria snoring gently on her royal pillow, anything but the deafening quiet of your own sleepless mind. Somewhere, a neighbor thumps their boot on the floor. A carriage rolls past, and you think, maybe tomorrow night it'll be better. Maybe the lettuce soup just needs time to work. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a cure around the corner. You hear a rumor. Someone down the lane says Queen Victoria herself has trouble sleeping. That does something strange to you. It's oddly comforting, like if even the monarch can't catch a decent night's rest, maybe your nightly wrestling match with the bedsheets isn't such a personal failure after all. And yes, the newspapers whisper it. The Queen, widow to Prince Albert, somber and swaddled in black, sits in Windsor Castle or Balmoral, staring out of rain-streaked windows well past midnight. Her doctors prescribe her everything from bromide tonics to light reading. Even royal grief isn't immune to insomnia. It's not just gossip. Historical accounts hint at her nocturnal habits, long walks, letters penned at ungodly hours, and a penchant for candlelight solitude. They don't call her the Widow of Windsor for nothing. You imagine her, pacing long halls lined with oil portraits, unable to sleep, maybe sipping a draught brewed by palace apothecaries, perhaps even one involving lettuce. Historians still argue whether her sleep troubles were physical, emotional, or political. Grief, governance, guilt. Either way, the public picks up on it. And just like that, not sleeping becomes more than a personal ailment. It becomes fashionable, a little tragic, a little poetic. You, of course, are neither tragic nor poetic. You're just very, very tired. But you take a weird kind of comfort in the shared struggle. If the Queen lies awake like you do, then maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's the world. Enter the rise of sleep diaries. The Victorians love to document things, and sleep is no exception. You start one too. You scrawl notes with a stub of pencil. Fell asleep at 2:15. Woke at 4. Dreamed of a talking badger offering me tea. Felt judged. This isn't helping your case, medically speaking, but at least you're not alone. Newspapers print serials about characters who can't sleep. Authors describe characters haunted by nightmares, insomnia, or even phantom bells ringing in their heads. Literature starts to reflect this. You remember reading Wilkie Collins's The Woman in White, and there it is, that creeping, nighttime unease. In a world where gaslight creates shadows in every corner, it makes sense that fiction and reality blur at bedtime. You even read about artists and poets who refuse to sleep. They stay up by choice, claiming that the night is when their genius flows most freely. You try that once. Stay up with a candle, scribbling in your diary. Mostly you just get wax in your lap and a headache. Still, there's this blossoming culture of the sleepless intellectual, and the moment the Queen becomes part of that narrative, well, let's just say the upper classes stop pretending sleep is a virtue. Now it's a choice, a luxury, or a byproduct of profound thought. Of course, you can't exactly tell your supervisor at the textile mill that you're sleep-deprived because you're a tortured genius. He'd probably throw a spool at your head. You still have to function, still have to wake before dawn, scrub your face with freezing water, and act like you didn't spend half the night imagining phantom footsteps in the hall. Sleep starts to define class, even in its absence. The poor can't sleep because of work, noise, and cramped quarters. The rich can't sleep because their minds are just so very full. One is a tragedy, the other is a lifestyle. You get the worse end of that deal, of course. Meanwhile, you begin noticing something in fashion magazines and etiquette manuals. Advice for nighttime calm. Lavender sachets, Turkish rugs in the bedroom, tips for choosing the right mattress straw. All aimed at the genteel class. You try stuffing your pillowcase with lavender once. It makes you sneeze for 10 minutes, and then you lie awake trying not to sneeze again. There's also talk of ambient sound. Some upper-class homes now feature small fountains or even caged birds placed near the bedroom to sing you to sleep. You, sadly, have the sound of Mr. Cross 2 floors down, snoring like a steam engine with a cold. The Queen's chronic insomnia even fuels changes in medicine. Doctors begin to specialize in nervous conditions. Clinics open in London and Edinburgh, touting new treatments for the sleepless. You see a flyer once. Mental exhaustion and nervous distress, treated with discretion and care. You wonder what that means. You don't have the shillings to find out. You do overhear someone say the Queen's physicians are now recommending nature walks and reading poetry aloud before bed. You try that too, except your local nature walk involves a muddy alley and 3 suspicious cats, and your book of poetry is mostly water-damaged sermons. Still, you do your best. There's something soothing in the idea that sleeplessness is shared, even royal. It's not like catching the flu. It's more like belonging to a strange nighttime club, the Midnight Order of the Bleary-Eyed. You find out the Queen has a favorite blend of tea. Not for sleep exactly, but for comfort. Black currant and dried orange peel. You brew a mock version using whatever scraps you can find in the pantry. It doesn't help you sleep, but it does make you feel a little more regal. At some point, probably the 4th or 5th consecutive night of not sleeping, you begin to hallucinate just a little. The shadows stretch, the floor creaks in ways that sound like whispers. You imagine Queen Victoria herself seated at the edge of your bed, sipping her royal lettuce broth and muttering, "Sleep is for the weak." She fades. You blink, still awake. And the next morning, when your co-worker mentions she didn't sleep either, you just nod, solemn. You've both joined the Queen's court of the sleepless. You shuffle down a cobbled side street, squinting into the fog, until you see it. The flickering oil lamp above the wooden door, and the faded gold lettering that reads, Apothecary. The door creaks open like it's just woken from a nap itself, and you step inside, hit instantly by the smell. Sweet herbs, old wood, a sharp whiff of something metallic, maybe mercury. You're here for one thing, sleep. You're not sure if what the apothecary offers will knock you out or kill you, but at this point, you're willing to roll the dice. The shelves are chaos and wonder. Little brown bottles with handwritten labels, tins full of dried roots, a large, disturbingly toothy jar labeled powdered antelope horn. You've entered the Victorian cure-all emporium, a place where the line between science and sorcery is basically a suggestion. The apothecary looks up, owl-like behind round glasses. He peers at you as if he can smell your insomnia. Maybe he can. You explain your sleeplessness, carefully skipping the part where you sometimes imagine your bed sheets whisper. He nods with gravity, opens a drawer and begins pulling things out. Valerian root, hops, poppy extract, and of course, lettuce syrup. Yes, it exists. Someone actually went ahead and bottled lettuce, supposedly distilled into something potent enough to help you sleep without boiling half a salad every night. The apothecary offers it up like a chalice. 2 drops, he says, on the tongue. Not more. You nod. You're absolutely going to try more than 2 drops. And then, without even blinking, he shows you the real heavy hitters, laudanum and chloral hydrate. These are not your grandmother's remedies. Laudanum is a mix of alcohol and opium, which Victorians take for everything from headaches to heartbreak. Chloral hydrate, it's a new chemical sedative, suspiciously nicknamed a knockout drop. Historians still argue whether chloral hydrate marked the beginning of modern sleep medicine or just another phase in history's long, clumsy experiment with knocking people unconscious. You ask what's safest. He smirks and says, "Nothing's truly safe if you're tired enough." Then he wraps your little bottle of lettuce syrup in paper and gives you a complimentary satchel of dried chamomile, like a goodwill gift for the nearly deranged. You head home and survey your bounty like a desperate wizard preparing for a final spell. The lettuce syrup goes on the tongue, bitter, earthy, a little like biting a spoon that's been used to stir tea and never washed. It tingles. You wait, nothing. You try the chamomile tea, steeped until golden, with a bit of honey scavenged from your dwindling cupboard. It's warm and comforting like drinking a memory. Still, no sleep. You eye the other vials. There's the valerian, which smells like someone left old socks in a flower pot. You nearly gag just opening it, but in it goes, drop by drop, into a warm spoonful of sugar water. Maybe it works. Maybe it just distracts you with the taste of a skunk's dream. Victorian apothecaries aren't regulated like modern pharmacies. There's no FDA, no prescriptions, no side effects may include leaflets. Just faith, tradition, and the occasional early grave. One popular fringe remedy is syrup of lettuce mixed with extract of wild poppy, supposed to be the best of both worlds. Natural calm with a touch of narcotic haze. Of course, measuring your own doses often means accidentally inventing a new sleep disorder. You're not alone in this nighttime ritual. Up and down the streets, people are sipping their herbal mixtures, taking their powders, rubbing odd-smelling oils into their temples. Some are praying, others are just lying in the dark, eyes wide open, rehearsing every mistake they've ever made. The line between medicine and magic is blurry. Some apothecaries sell tonics blessed by local priests. Others claim their sleeping powders are ground under the full moon. There's even a rumor of an apothecary in Bath who reads palms before choosing your remedy. One very old man swears by warm beer mixed with nutmeg. Another says his wife hasn't slept in 20 years but copes just fine, with a nightly dram of gin and reciting Psalm 23 in Latin. You don't speak Latin, but you definitely considered the gin. There's also the electric option. Some forward-thinking establishments offer mild shocks to the temples as a cure. Electrotherapy. You're told it stimulates the fatigue center of the brain. You're not sure whether that's a real place or just code for fries your nerves into a nap. Victorian newspapers get in on the action too. Advertisements for Dr. Calmington's sleep elixir promise immediate dreamful slumber for just 2 shillings a bottle. One ad boasts that it worked on horses. You try not to take offense. You find a torn clipping in a book one night, a testimonial from a woman named Elsie. After 3 years of restless nights, I took the lettuce cordial and was asleep within minutes. I dreamt of angels. I awoke cured and haven't had a single bad night since. Praise Dr. Calmington. It sounds fake, it is fake, but you wish it were real. Tonight you try all of it. A full ritual, steam from hot water, a rag soaked in lavender oil on your forehead, 3 drops of syrup, a mug of chamomile, and a silent promise not to think about laundry or money or death. You lie back, breath slowing. For a moment you think, this might be it. This might be the night. And then your neighbor's baby starts crying. You sigh, sit up and stare at the ceiling. Sleep will come eventually, or you'll get better at pretending. The thing about lettuce is, it's the gentle option. A sleepy little salad leaf floating through the Victorian chaos like a quiet guest at a riot. Because while you're sipping your lukewarm broth and wondering if you've simply invented a very boring tea party, other people are skipping right past lettuce and going full-blown chemical warfare on their insomnia. You hear whispers in the market. So-and-so's aunt swears by laudanum. My cousin drinks bromide before bed, slept straight through a thunderstorm and a chimney fire. You raise an eyebrow because you've been lying awake for 3 nights straight, wondering if you're becoming slightly translucent from exhaustion. In truth, you're surrounded by a world of extreme cures. Lettuce soup is the herbal hug, but out there, Victorians are experimenting with substances that could either put you to sleep or permanently relocate your soul. Start with laudanum. It's everywhere. A dark, sticky tincture of opium and alcohol sold in elegant glass bottles with names like Mother Bailey's Quiet Drops or Nurse Macfarlane's Soothing Syrup. Even the labels sound like lullabies. What they don't say is, take too much, and your dreams might go on forever. You read about a man in Bristol who takes laudanum nightly for overexcitable dreams. He now talks in his sleep about hunting demons in the wallpaper. His wife sleeps in another room. Historians still argue whether laudanum was truly meant for long-term use, or if Victorian pharmacists just shrugged and figured, well, it makes them stop complaining. Either way, it was handed out like candy, especially to women. And that's the next uncomfortable truth. Your gender can determine what kind of sleep treatment you're offered. Women get the opiates, gentle sedatives, soothing syrups laced with ingredients that would, in modern times, be stored behind multiple steel doors. Men, they get electric baths. Yes, electric baths. A fashionable nightmare where you lie in a shallow tub while currents are sent through your body in the name of soothing the nerves. You wonder what kind of nerves feel soothed when being lightly cooked. You hear of one clinic in London that combines electric stimulation with hypnosis and peppermint tea. A modern marvel, they call it. You can't decide if that's science, theater, or just creative bullying. Then there's cocaine. Yes, cocaine. In the Victorian era, it's a miracle drug, good for toothaches, melancholia, and, bizarrely, insomnia when applied in moderation. Applied where, you ask? Nobody seems totally sure. The guidelines are vague, and the side effects? Sweaty mania. You figure that's not conducive to rest, but maybe that's just you. One very enthusiastic pamphlet swears by a tonic called Vin Mariani, a Bordeaux wine infused with cocaine. Apparently, Queen Victoria received a case as a gift. You picture her sipping it in her drawing room, pupils dilated, knitting faster than the laws of physics should allow. And if drugs don't work, there's mesmerism. A whole movement of people who believe that sleep can be triggered through eye contact and magnetic passes of the hands. It's part science, part showmanship. You attend a session out of desperation. The mesmerist is a man with wild hair and a voice like buttered velvet. He waves his fingers in front of your face for 40 minutes. You stay stubbornly awake. He tells you it's your fault. Too skeptical, he says, and offers a free demonstration of something called animal magnetism. You decline, politely. Fringe medicine flourishes in these sleepless times. There's talk of lunar tinctures, potions brewed under a full moon to capture nocturnal energy. A woman named Myrtle sells them from her barrow in Soho. You ask what's in it. She just smiles and hands you a vial that smells like regret. And then there's the diet advice. Some doctors say meat makes you sleepless. Others say meat prevents nightmares. One particularly odd volume claims the true cause of insomnia is intestinal mischief and recommends nothing but boiled carrots and milk. For a month. You try that for a week. Your dreams become surreal episodes featuring anthropomorphic vegetables. You quit. Back to the drugstore. You eye the shelf marked night formulas. Everything from lettuce syrup to chloroform. Yes, that chloroform. The one used for surgery. People soak handkerchiefs in it and breathe it in until they black out. You consider it for a minute. Then remember someone at the factory passed out that way and woke up 2 days later thinking he was an otter. So, you stick to your corner, your gentle lettuce soup, your calming teas, maybe a valerian capsule if you're feeling bold. Because as terrifying as sleeplessness is, the alternatives, they're worse. And yet somewhere deep in your tired brain, you understand it. The desperation. Because when the night stretches into its 4th hour and you've counted every crack in the ceiling, you would swallow anything if it meant even 20 minutes of dreamless oblivion. You lie there, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the street lamp flickers. You hear the muffled laughter of someone who's either drunk or finally fallen asleep on their feet. And somewhere, someone is boiling another batch of lettuce leaves. One more ritual, one more chance. Because sometimes the safest option is the soggiest one. You wake up, not because you were sleeping, mind you, but because your body gave up pretending. Your eyes were already open. You were just lying still enough to trick yourself. The thin grey morning light is bleeding through the curtain, and once again, you face the day on fumes and habit. You wonder, is this normal now? Or is something quietly breaking inside you? Sleep, or the lack of it, has begun to show. You catch your reflection in the wash basin mirror, eyes sunken, skin a shade that could be described as haunted porcelain. You'd laugh, but your face doesn't feel like it remembers how. And this isn't just you. All over Victorian England, the exhausted are walking the streets. Pale shopkeepers, bleary-eyed clerks, factory workers squinting at machinery. They move like ghosts who still pay rent. Enter the next chapter of the Great Sleep Experiment. Sleep hygiene. No, not washing your pillowcases, although, let's be honest, you should do that. This is about rituals, behaviors, the slowly forming belief that maybe, just maybe, it's not about the soup or the syrup, it's about the setting. Mainstream medical journals from the 1880s start publishing new recommendations. Make your bedroom calm, cool, clean. You raise an eyebrow at that last one. Have these doctors seen London during coal season? Still, people start trying. You hear of a family that swaps their feather mattress for straw, convinced it's the feathers causing mental agitation. Another decides to move their bed to the north wall to align with the Earth's magnetic flow. Historians still argue whether these early ideas of bedroom orientation were rooted in old folk beliefs or just pure trial and error. You try a few things yourself. You rearrange your room, placing your bed near the window to catch fresh air. You stuff rags in the cracks under the door to block drafts. You start lighting a single candle instead of 3 in case the brightness was throwing off your internal sundial. Then you read a curious pamphlet called The 10 Rules of Nightly Repose. It includes such tips as avoid stimulating conversation after sunset, never read fiction within an hour of bed, do not consume turnips after dark, never sleep with your feet pointed westward. You comply with maybe 2 of those, definitely not the turnip one. You like turnips. One widely popular tip is to walk slowly, aimlessly before bed. A constitutional. You try this. You wander the alleys behind your flat, listening to the muffled sounds of city nightlife. Footsteps echo. A cat yowls. A piano plays faintly in the distance. A melancholic waltz just slow enough to make you sad for no reason. You return home chilled and no sleepier than before, but the movement helps. A little. Your thoughts feel less like boiling soup and more like gentle ripples. Other people take it further. You hear of someone building a sleep nook, a closet-sized chamber lined with heavy velvet and stuffed with lavender bags. Another man begins playing a single note on a piano repeatedly before bed, calling it his hypnotic anchor. That one doesn't catch on. The Victorians are inventing the modern bedtime routine in real time, and you're right in the middle of it. Hot water bottles become more common. Some boil bricks and wrap them in cloth to keep toes warm, like cuddling with an oven-safe pet. Your landlady offers you a hot brick once. It's oddly comforting, though you do burn your ankle slightly when it slips under the blanket. Then there's the breathing. Yes, even that. Some pamphlets promote rhythmic respiration, inhaling and exhaling in specific patterns. One doctor recommends breathing only through the left nostril before bed. You give it a go. It mostly makes your nose tickle and causes a mild existential crisis when you can't remember which side is left. You try silence, then sound. The soft ticking of your mantle clock becomes your companion. Tick, 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 each one both a lullaby and a countdown. You wonder if it's your thoughts, not your body, that are keeping you awake. The Victorians are starting to think so too. One emerging theory is mental fatigue without physical fatigue, a new imbalance caused by modern living. People reading, thinking, stressing without working their bodies enough to earn their rest. So you take up sweeping the stairwell voluntarily. You tell the other tenants you enjoy it. You don't. But afterward, you're pleasantly sore. Your sleep that night lasts a full 73 minutes. A new record. Someone recommends a worry notebook, writing down your anxieties before bed so they don't chase you into your dreams. You try that too. What if the soup is cursed? You write one night. What if I never sleep again? What if Queen Victoria isn't real? That last one is probably just the Valerian talking. Yet, slowly, all these little rituals begin to stack up. No single one is magic, but together, they form a kind of sleepy scaffolding, a system, a structure for stillness. And as you lie there, brick-warmed toes under the blanket, candle flickering low, breath slowing, you realize something. The goal isn't to force sleep, it's to make peace with it, to let it find you instead of chasing it like a criminal. You blink once, twice, and just before dawn, You finally drift off. You awaken to sunlight, not the metallic gray of usual mornings, but actual sunlight, warm, golden, unapologetic. And for the first time in what feels like weeks, you don't wake up in a panic. You don't feel hunted by the hour. You feel, dare you say it, rested. The moment is short-lived. A thump from above, a scream from the street, and someone banging a carpet somewhere nearby. But still, that flicker of sleep, real sleep, gives you something to hold on to. Proof that it's possible. You're not broken. Not entirely. You've become a bit of an insomniac anthropologist by now, tracking not just your own rituals, but what others are doing too. And what's becoming increasingly clear is that Victorian society is trying to reinvent sleep itself. Not just treat insomnia, but define sleep. Understand it, categorize it, monetize it. Doctors and philosophers are beginning to write essays not just about how to sleep, but why we sleep at all. It's an era teetering on the brink of modern science, and that means everyone suddenly has a theory. One popular model describes sleep as a temporary death of the senses, which isn't exactly comforting. Another claims the soul temporarily leaves the body during slumber and floats in a dreamlike ether. You sincerely hope that's not true. You don't think your soul could find its way back with your sense of direction. Historians still argue whether this wave of interest in sleep science was driven by real discoveries or just an upper-class obsession with having opinions about everything. Either way, sleep is no longer just a passive state, it's a frontier. A few particularly forward-thinking physicians start collecting dream reports. They call it nocturnal psychography, which sounds fancy but really just means writing down weird dreams and trying to sound clever about it. You begin jotting your own dreams in a battered notebook. Last night's entry reads, "Rode a horse made of pudding across a lake of spoons. Queen Victoria in a rowboat shouted, 'Turnips are watching.'" You have no idea what it means, but you're pretty sure Freud would have had a field day. There's also a sudden burst of interest in lucid dreaming, becoming aware that you're dreaming and gaining control of it. Victorian mystics, spiritualists, and the odd eccentric preacher all claim it's the key to unlocking divine wisdom, or, at the very least, getting to fly around London in your underwear without judgment. You try it. You whisper to yourself before bed, "Tonight I will know I'm dreaming. I will fly. I will talk to the moon." Instead, you dream about being late for work and arguing with a loaf of bread about your schedule. Still, there's a growing belief that dreams hold insight, that sleep is not just recovery, but revelation. Writers begin to use dream states as plot devices. Poets pen odes to the velvet realm of night. And you? You start to wonder if your dreams might one day explain why you're so bad at sleeping to begin with. Science, meanwhile, tries to catch up. A Scottish doctor begins dissecting animal brains to find the sleep gland. Spoiler, he does not find it. Another theorist claims sleep happens when the blood leaves the brain, based on nothing really, except that he liked the idea. One fringe group in Oxford even suggests wearing iron bands around the forehead to contain the thoughts and encourage mental stillness. You imagine everyone sitting in bed wearing little iron crowns, looking like sleep-deprived royalty. You kind of want one. There are also new ideas emerging about sleep stages, that perhaps sleep isn't one long, undifferentiated blob, but a sequence of different depths. Light sleep, deep sleep, dream sleep. People start tracking when they wake during the night, trying to spot a pattern. You begin doing it too. On one page of your journal, you create little marks. 9 p.m. in bed. 9:40, still awake. 11 o'clock, arm numb, moved. 1:20, dream of speaking snail. 3:30, woke up for no reason. 5:45, bird screamed directly at window. It's not helpful, but it's something. A record. A map of the places you visit when your body lies still. A particularly inventive clergyman starts preaching about divine sleep cycles. He believes God designed humans to sleep in multiple short bursts, not one long stretch. He encourages his congregation to nap twice a day and hold night vigils every few hours. Half his followers love it. The other half are just more tired. You try it once, break your night into 2 parts. Sleep from 9 to midnight. Get up and read until 2. Then try to sleep again until sunrise. It's weirdly peaceful. The city is quiet in those hours. You hear no carts, no boots, no shouting, just the creak of the rafters and the occasional owl. For a moment, the insomnia feels less like a curse and more like a secret, like you've slipped between the cracks of time. Some believe broken sleep was always the natural way, that ancient people didn't sleep in solid 8-hour blocks, but instead had first sleep and second sleep. You find that idea oddly comforting. Maybe you're not broken, you're just medieval. A friend tells you about a new group forming in the countryside, the Society of Restful Rhythm. They believe sleep should follow the phases of the moon. More sleep during the waxing phase, less during the waning. They host sleep retreats in barns, drink oat milk and hum lullabies in unison. It sounds ridiculous. You're tempted to go anyway, because in this strange Victorian moment, sleep is no longer private. It's political, poetic, profitable. A mystery people are desperate to solve. And you, one tiny thread in the sleepless tapestry, are part of that quest. One dream journal, one bowl of lettuce soup, one midnight walk at a time. There's something odd about how, once you start paying attention to sleep, everyone around you becomes an expert. Your milkman insists it's all about the moon phases. Your neighbor believes in magnetic headboards. A woman in the bakery whispers that turning your pillow at exactly 2 a.m. resets your dreams to factory settings. You nod politely, of course. You're Victorian after all, but inside you're screaming because you've tried everything short of hiring a personal lullaby butler, and still sleep flirts, teases, then runs away laughing. That's when you hear it. A buzz, faint but growing. The sleep machines are coming. Now, don't get too excited. We're not talking about slick, glowing gadgets or digital apps. This is the 1800s. These machines wheeze, hiss, and rattle like arthritic dragons, but they represent something big, a belief that sleep could be engineered, mechanized, even manufactured, like textiles or tea biscuits. You first see one at the public health exhibition, a hulking brass contraption labeled Somno-Vapor Therapy Engine. It releases a controlled puff of warm, herb-infused air every 30 seconds, supposedly to lull the body into rhythmic calm. The inventor, a man with a waxed mustache and an enthusiasm you find personally threatening, swears it saved his marriage. You stand in front of it, inhaling deeply. It smells like a greenhouse crashed into a bakery. You don't sleep that night, but your sinuses have never felt better. Historians still argue whether these early sleep devices were real science or just cleverly marketed snake oil in steam-powered clothing. What's clear is this: the Victorians believed that technology could finally conquer the most human mystery of all, why we sleep and how to make it happen. Some machines use heat, others use sound. One, built by a professor in Glasgow, involves a rotating glass orb filled with glowing water that hypnotizes the optic nerve. You stare at it for 3 full minutes before blinking yourself into a headache. Then there's the slumber seat, a patented rocking chair with internal gears that mimic a mother's lull. You see it in an ad. Like the cradle, but for grown minds. You sit in one at a friend's home and feel oddly soothed until it tips over and deposits you onto a footstool. Another design, less charming, is the nocturnal steam cabinet. You step inside, close the door, and let yourself be steamed like a pudding until you either sweat out your anxiety or pass out from the heat. You hear one man describe the experience as being hugged by a hot ghost. You don't try that one. The real star of the movement is white noise, not the term yet, but the concept. Devices are built to simulate the sounds of wind, waves, or distant thunder. You listen to a machine that spins metal paddles inside a chamber to recreate natural rustling. It sounds like a beetle tap dancing on a biscuit tin. Still, you appreciate the effort. One woman in your building swears by her automatic slumber globe, a small box that turns slowly, casting starlight shapes onto the ceiling. She says it helps her feel like she's drifting through the cosmos. You peek in one evening and find her snoring softly, face bathed in glowing blue dots. Maybe she's onto something. It's not just individuals. Hospitals and asylums begin to experiment with environment-driven sleep therapies. Temperature-controlled rooms, timed lighting, mechanical lullabies. A few experimental sleep wards even design their entire night shifts around optimal slumber cycles. You wonder if you can fake an illness just to spend a night in one. You can't afford these devices, of course. Most people can't. But the dream, the idea, trickles down. Sleep isn't just natural anymore. It's aspirational. Controlled sleep becomes a luxury. You're either lucky, rich, or both if you drift off easily. This is when people start talking about ideal conditions. Room temperature of 58 degrees, 3 inches of mattress straw. No noise louder than a cat's sigh. You're lucky if your room doesn't leak or host at least 2 rodents with marital issues. But you try to mimic the experience. You make your own sound machine by leaving the window cracked just enough to let in the wind. You hang a string of beads near the door so they knock gently with the draft. You sleep better that night, or at least you dream of sleeping. It's hard to tell anymore. Some fringe inventors go all in. One man in Devon invents a dream conductor, a headband wired to a crank-powered static generator. Supposedly, it controls the quality and content of dreams. You imagine trying it and waking up every morning with the plot of Frankenstein tangled in your sheets. And then there's the infamous sleep fan, a big noisy contraption that spins slowly and emits a steady whoosh. It's meant to mimic wind on a grassy plain. You visit a home that has one, and for a moment sitting near it you feel calm. Not sleepy exactly, but less awake, which is a step in the right direction. By the end of the month, you've tried building a sleep fort from heavy blankets, arranging mirrors to reflect candlelight in a soothing pattern, and rubbing mint leaves into your wrists like some kind of sleepy Victorian sorcerer. Nothing is magic, but everything helps a little, and that's the secret, isn't it? It's not one big solution. It's layers, sound, smell, light, routine, comfort. Together they build a space where sleep might feel safe enough to return. You drift off one night with the window open, your lettuce soup lukewarm beside you, and a candle flickering faint constellations on your wall. You wake 3 hours later, startled but satisfied. It's a start. Sleep isn't just something you do. It's something you build. You start to notice something else. The growing obsession with diet and sleep. Everyone seems to believe that what you eat or don't eat before bed could either lull you into a gentle slumber or unleash a night of tossing, turning, and questioning your life choices. Lettuce soup, remember? That humble dish seems to be the unofficial mascot of Victorian sleeplessness cures. It's easy to imagine why. Mild, watery, barely flavored, and loaded with lactocarium, the chemical in lettuce believed to have sedative properties. You try it once, more out of curiosity than hope, and find yourself wondering if you're just pretending it works because you're so desperate. But you quickly learn that lettuce soup isn't the whole story. The Victorian diet is a complicated beast when it comes to sleep. A growing chorus of doctors argue that heavy fatty meals right before bedtime are the enemy. Yet others suggest that going to bed hungry invites insomnia to your bedside. You read about one doctor who recommends a glass of warm milk with honey as a nightly ritual. You try it. The warmth soothes, but the cloying sweetness makes you cringe. You imagine Victorian farmers chugging milk and wondering if they're supposed to moo afterward. Others swear by chamomile tea, a beverage with gentle floral tones and the promise of dream-filled nights. You brew a cup once, but it tastes like someone distilled a flower garden and added sad water. Still, it's relaxing enough to try again. You become fascinated by the rise of herbal remedies in Victorian apothecaries. Valerian root, hops, and passion flower are lined up on dusty shelves, each promising a different kind of sleep. Deep, dreamless, or peaceful. You buy small bags of these dried plants and steep them into unappetizing infusions that taste like sadness. Some of these remedies are downright strange. One apothecary recommends tinctures made from poppy juice. Careful though, because the line between medicine and opiate is very thin. You don't try that. You value your dignity, if not your sleep. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of these herbal remedies was physiological, psychological, or a heady combination of placebo and hope. But everyone agrees they shaped the sleep culture of the era. You also learn about the Victorian fear of stimulants. Coffee and tea are suspect, blamed for insomnia, nervousness, even madness. The temperance movement extends its reach, warning against late-night cups of tea as if they were mini rebellions against nature. Your own tea consumption declines dramatically, replaced by the occasional swallow of warm milk or a spoonful of lettuce soup. You think about caffeine the way modern people think about a bullet train. Fast, dangerous, and best avoided before bedtime. The diet debate doesn't stop with what you eat, but also when. Victorian doctors suggest you stop eating at least 2 hours before bed to allow digestion to settle, a rule you try and fail to keep, because hunger and habit rarely cooperate. One particularly intriguing theory proposes that sleep is a kind of metabolic reset, and food timing must align with the body's natural clock. You wonder how they knew about circadian rhythms back then. Maybe it was all the watching of roosters. You find yourself logging your meals and sleep patterns in a notebook, a mix of scientific rigor and desperate hope. When you eat a late dinner, you toss and turn. When you eat early and light, you sometimes sleep better, but sometimes the hunger pangs take over. You try a little experiment, a day of fasting followed by a small, plain supper. The night is restless but less agonizing than usual. You suspect something's working, but you can't quite pin it down. The intersection of diet and sleep becomes more than personal trial. It becomes a cultural obsession. Sleep manuals list foods to avoid: onions, garlic, spices, alcohol, rich pastries. Instead, they promote blandness: boiled rice, simple stews, lettuce soups, and the ever-popular warm milk. You begin to appreciate the irony. The Victorian cure for sleeplessness might be to strip away the sensory pleasures of eating, the colorful, robust flavors of life traded for plainness, for peace, for the hope of sleep. And sometimes, as you sip your lukewarm lettuce soup by candlelight, you think that maybe the dullness is the point. Maybe sleep isn't about excitement or stimulation, but surrender. Maybe the bland, the quiet, the routine, they're the true lullabies. As you adjust your diet and sleep rituals, you become more aware of the Victorian bedroom itself, a space evolving in response to insomnia and sleep science. The bedroom is no longer just where you dump your things and collapse. It's a carefully curated environment designed to coax you into slumber. You start noticing the trend. Heavy curtains stuffed thick with cotton, velvet, or brocade. These aren't just fashion statements. They're sound dampeners, light blockers, and wind stoppers. People believe a quiet, dark, and draft-free room is essential for deep sleep. You pull your own curtains tighter at night, noticing how the street noises dull, how the shadows deepen. It's a subtle transformation, but it feels important. The bed itself gets an upgrade. No more straw mattresses that squeak and crunch under you. Instead, feather beds and layered blankets become the dreamer's luxury. Some even invest in elaborate canopies, not just for privacy, but for keeping warmth in. You wonder what it must have been like to sleep in such a nest, cocooned against the chill and chaos of the city. You start seeing mentions of bedroom color palettes too. Pale blues, soft greens, and muted lavenders are recommended to calm the senses, as opposed to reds or yellows, which supposedly excite the nervous system. You paint your bedroom walls with thrift store paint swatches, hoping the soft hues will charm your insomnia away. You can't help but feel a bit ridiculous, but hey, if it works. Then there's the curious Victorian love affair with aromatherapy. Lavender sachets tucked under pillows, rosemary branches hung near the bed, and drops of rosewater sprinkled on linen are believed to relax the mind and invite peaceful dreams. You smell the lavender oil on a sample card once and wonder if anyone has ever used it as a perfume for a really formal duel. The bedroom becomes a multi-sensory experience. Soft textures, muted light, gentle scents, and a strict temperature regime. You learn that the ideal temperature hovers around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, cooler than you'd expect but consistent with what modern science suggests even today. Some Victorians take things a step further by installing ventilation shafts or small stoves designed to maintain this sleep temperature. It's a balancing act, keeping the room neither too warm nor too cold. You think about your drafty apartment and wish for even one of those small inventions. A few oddities catch your attention, like the use of crocodile dung as a skin salve to prevent chills. You're not trying that one, but it illustrates how desperate people were to control every detail that might impact sleep. The furniture arrangement itself is subject to advice columns. Beds should face east for spiritual reasons or north for health. Dressers and chairs should be positioned to avoid sleep shadows, whatever those are. You try to rearrange your furniture according to these guidelines, but the tiny space and lack of power tools make it difficult. Still, you appreciate the symbolism of it. Sleep as a sacred art. A particularly popular addition is the sleeping bell, a small device that gently rings to wake you after a set amount of sleep. Part alarm clock, part nudge toward segmented sleep patterns. It's the precursor to the modern alarm clock, though not as reliable and a lot louder. You wonder if you'd want to be jolted awake or gently roused by a bell. Probably the bell. In a few grand houses, you even hear about night nurses or attendants who stay up to watch over insomniac family members, offering hot drinks, massage, or whispered encouragement. It's a strange concept to you, but oddly comforting. A human presence in the lonely hours of night. All these bedroom innovations reflect a larger Victorian belief that sleep isn't just a biological need, but a cultivated ritual. You start to see your bedroom less as a place to pass out and more like a temple dedicated to rest. And yet, for all this effort, you still find yourself staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., wondering if there's some secret ingredient missing. Maybe sleep is less about the room or the soup and more about something deeper, something you haven't quite figured out yet. The Victorian bedroom is a work in progress, just like you. You start noticing how sleep's elusive dance is being choreographed by the Victorian medical establishment itself. Doctors, scientists, and quacks all staking their claim on the nocturnal battleground. The medical profession is waking up to insomnia, seeing it not just as a symptom but a condition to be treated seriously. Physicians prescribe everything from herbal remedies to hypnotic suggestion. You encounter the rise of what they call moral therapy, where a doctor recommends quietude, modesty, and a strict routine to soothe frayed nerves. It sounds like a polite way of saying, stop worrying so much, but in Victorian terms it's practically a prescription for nirvana. You attend a lecture where a doctor explains the importance of nerve tonics, elixirs made from bark, roots, and rare minerals. The idea is to strengthen the nervous system, tired from modern life's stresses and city pollution. You wonder if these tonics would taste better mixed with lettuce soup or the less popular boredom broth. One fringe doctor swears by phrenology to diagnose sleep disorders, reading the bumps and curves of your skull to determine which parts of your brain need rest. You're skeptical, but slightly intrigued. You imagine someone inspecting your head and saying, "Ah yes, your bump of insomnia is quite pronounced." The rise of hypnotism also captures your imagination. You hear about mesmerists who can put patients to sleep with a flick of the wrist or a soft word. You imagine a Victorian version of a DJ, spinning hypnotic beats to coax the city to bed. Sadly, your attempts at self-hypnosis mostly result in you daydreaming about tea and biscuits. Yet, despite all these advances, there's still a stigma attached to admitting insomnia. Some doctors claim it's a symptom of moral weakness or spiritual failing. You find this frustrating. How can sleep be a character flaw? You long for a society that treats sleeplessness with the compassion it deserves. You begin keeping a sleep diary, meticulously noting every restless night, every fleeting dream, every cup of chamomile tea. It feels scientific, empowering, and a bit obsessive. But you also notice that the act of recording itself sometimes calms your mind, creating a ritual that gently guides you towards sleep. The medical community debates heatedly over the causes of insomnia. Is it nerves, poor diet, bad air, the effects of city life? Historians still argue whether Victorian insomnia was a product of modernity or just a timeless human struggle dressed in a corset. You learn about early experiments with light therapy, a strange practice where patients sit under bright lamps to reset their sleep-wake cycles. It sounds oddly futuristic for the time. You picture someone in a top hat sitting by a glowing box, squinting like a vampire adjusting to daylight. The emerging field of psychology also weighs in. Some thinkers propose that anxiety and mental turmoil are at the heart of sleeplessness. It's a radical shift from blaming the body alone. You feel seen. Maybe the battles in your mind are as real as the battles in your bones. Yet the medical remedies are a mixed bag. Some treatments offer relief, others are cruel or bizarre. You read about sleeping powders containing opium or chloral hydrate, effective but dangerous. You avoid these, wary of trading one nightmare for another. You realize that in Victorian times, just like today, treating sleep is as much art as science. The ideal cure doesn't just quiet the body but soothes the restless mind, and sometimes the best medicine is simply time. You hold on to that thought as you prepare for another night, armed with lettuce soup, lavender, and the faint hope that tomorrow's sleep will be a little sweeter. Your quest for restful sleep now leads you deeper into the Victorian fascination with dreams, those fleeting, mysterious stories your mind whispers while your body lies still. Sleep isn't just about rest, it's about what happens when you're unconscious, the secret life of the sleeper. Dream interpretation becomes a popular pastime, with books and lectures promising to decode what your mind's theater is trying to tell you. You pick up a small volume on dream symbolism and leaf through it by lamplight. To your surprise, lettuce appears often, signifying calm, healing, or sometimes boredom. You chuckle softly at the idea your dinner might be sneaking into your subconscious. Victorians believed dreams are windows into the soul, messages from the divine, or echoes of suppressed desires. You think about your restless nights and wonder what stories your mind is spinning behind the curtains of sleep. You learn that the boundary between sleep and wakefulness is a curious one. The Victorians observe hypnagogic states, those moments just before sleep where reality blurs into dreams. People report strange visions, sounds, or even the sensation of floating. You try to pay attention next time you drift off, but your mind mostly just replays grocery lists. One scholar describes dreams as the royal road to the unconscious, a phrase that feels strangely modern for a time when Freud is just starting to stir in Vienna. You feel caught between old superstitions and emerging science, a time when dreams are both sacred and suspect. Dreams also inspire art, literature, and music. You find yourself humming Victorian ballads that speak of moonlit visions and enchanted slumbers. Writers describe their characters' dreams in intricate detail, reflecting society's fascination with the night's hidden world. There's also a darker side. Nightmares and night terrors are feared and misunderstood. Some believe they are visitations by evil spirits or punishment for sins. Remedies range from prayer to burying charms under the bed. You admit you've tried crossing yourself before sleep, just in case. You're intrigued by the concept of sleepwalking, somnambulism, and the fear that one might wander the night in a trance, vulnerable and lost. Some Victorian manuals advise installing locks and safety measures to protect these nocturnal wanderers. You wonder if anyone ever sleepwalked into a lettuce patch and dreamt of soup. Dream journals start to emerge, precious keepsakes where Victorians record their nightly adventures. You decide to start your own, scribbling down whatever fragments you can remember. The act of writing it out feels like stitching a thread between your waking self and the mysterious sleeper within. The practice of lucid dreaming, being aware you're dreaming and possibly controlling the dream, is just beginning to be explored. You imagine the freedom of flying or visiting distant places, but mostly your dreams involve awkward social encounters and missing carriages. The question lingers: are dreams meaningful or just random noise? Historians still argue whether Victorian society saw dreams as scientific data or mystical experiences. You find the ambiguity comforting. Sleep and dreams remain mysterious, resisting easy answers. As you lie down tonight, you let your mind wander to those twilight places between consciousness and oblivion. The veil is thin, and you feel the pull of the unknown. You close your eyes, hoping the night will bring stories worth remembering. The night deepens, and you find yourself drawn into the peculiar world of Victorian sleep rituals and superstitions. You realize that beyond science and diet, people embraced a rich tapestry of customs meant to chase away sleeplessness or the darker forces they believed caused it. For starters, you discover that dream catchers or similar protective charms were less common in Britain, but that many Victorians hung horseshoes above their beds, not just as rustic decor, but as wards against bad dreams and evil spirits. You imagine a row of shiny horseshoes glinting under candlelight, a bizarre armor against the terrors of the night. You read about the curious practice of spellbinding, where people would recite prayers or verses just before sleep to lock their souls safely in their bodies. Sometimes the ritual involved placing a Bible or other religious object beneath the pillow. You try a whispered prayer yourself, feeling a little silly but strangely reassured. The Victorians also had a peculiar fear of the night hag, a demon believed to sit on the chests of sleepers, causing nightmares and the sensation of suffocation. The phrase sleep paralysis wasn't coined yet, but you can guess the horror of waking unable to move, convinced a ghostly visitor is present. You shudder and check your covers. Another superstition involves mirrors. Some believe that looking into a mirror at night could trap your soul or invite spirits. You think about the bedroom mirror you've been avoiding in the dark and consider covering it with a cloth before bed. Then there's the tradition of placing sprigs of rue or rosemary around the room to cleanse the air and protect sleepers from witches or evil magic. The herb's sharp scent mixed with candle wax probably made Victorian bedrooms smell a bit like a garden in a bonfire. You imagine waking up sneezing but safe. Victorian children had their own bedtime rituals, like placing a glass of water under the bed to catch any wandering spirits or keeping a lock of hair to protect from nightmares. These customs blur the lines between superstition and tender care, parents' ways of comforting children in the dark. You stumble upon one of the quirkiest practices, sprinkling salt at the foot of the bed. Salt was believed to purify spaces, ward off demons, and keep bad dreams at bay. You try it once, feeling oddly like you're performing a secret magic trick. You notice how many of these superstitions revolve around control, trying to assert safety in the face of the unknown. After all, when science couldn't explain why you couldn't sleep, folklore stepped in to fill the gaps. You start to see sleep as a battleground of fear and hope, where the unseen world presses in just as heavily as your own restless thoughts. This mix of rational remedies and mystical defenses creates a rich cultural context for Victorian insomnia. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were genuine beliefs or comforting traditions passed down through families. You suspect they were both, ways to feel less alone in the dark. Tonight you try a small ritual, placing a sprig of lavender by your pillow and whispering a line from a poem about peaceful rest. It feels silly, but as you lie back, the act itself soothes you. Maybe you think sleep is as much about ritual and belief as it is about biology. You begin to explore the curious world of Victorian sleep aids and devices, those inventions and contraptions designed to solve insomnia's stubborn puzzle. It seems the Victorians were just as inventive, and sometimes just as desperate, as we are today. One popular device is the sleeping chair, an oddly angled piece of furniture meant to support the body in a semi-reclined position, supposedly reducing night sweats and encouraging restful sleep. You imagine someone carefully sliding into this chair, hoping the awkward posture will be worth it. The idea that you could sleep sitting up doesn't sound very comfortable, but hey, maybe it beats counting sheep. Then there's the bed warmer, a metal pan filled with hot coals slid under the bed covers to chase away the chill. You picture the smoky smell, the danger, and the relief of slipping into a warm nest on a cold night. You're glad modern heating has mostly made these relics obsolete, though you wouldn't mind one for winter. The hypnotic machine fascinates you, an early contraption that used flickering lights or rhythmic sounds to lull patients into sleep or trance. It sounds like Victorian tech's version of a sleep app, minus the screen and plus a lot more brass gears. You wonder if anyone ever fell asleep mid-experiment or just got dizzy. One particularly strange invention is the somnambulator chair, designed to hold sleepwalkers safely and prevent injury. You think about the stories of night wanderers, and it feels a bit like Victorian crowd control for the unconscious. You're glad your landlord doesn't require you to use one. You find advertisements for sleeping pills that promise quick relief but often come with a laundry list of side effects, drowsiness, confusion, or worse. You're reminded of modern warnings on medication bottles, proving some things never change. Victorians also experiment with mechanical rocking beds, aimed at mimicking the soothing sway of a cradle. You smile, picturing a grown adult gently rocked to sleep like a baby. There's something charmingly tender in that image. Curiously, you read about early white noise devices, such as wind chimes, trickling water features, or even specially designed fans, to mask the sounds of the city and promote calm. You're not surprised, considering how modern studies highlight the importance of sound in sleep quality. The era's fascination with technology extends to early electric light bulbs, though their harsh glare is often blamed for disrupting natural sleep rhythms. Some doctors recommend using dimmer, warmer light in the evening, sound advice centuries ahead of LED screens. You also find descriptions of sleeping sanctuaries, rooms designed with all these aids in mind: soundproofed walls, adjustable beds, controlled temperature, and sensory deprivation. It's a glimpse into an early version of what we'd now call a sleep clinic. Historians still argue how widespread these devices really were, whether they were used mostly by the wealthy or trickled down to the middle class. But one thing is clear: the Victorians didn't just accept insomnia, they fought it with everything at their disposal. You realize that beneath the frills and oddities, there's a timeless human desire at work to find peace in the night, however you can. You tuck yourself in, imagining the gentle hum of a mechanical rocking bed and the soft glow of a Victorian lamp, hoping tonight's inventions will finally do their job. As your exploration deepens, you encounter the Victorian obsession with diet as a cure for sleeplessness, a mix of practical advice, strange concoctions, and a surprising faith in food's power over the nervous system. You realize that food and sleep are more intertwined than you ever thought. You learn that lettuce soup isn't the only curious culinary sleep aid. The Victorians also recommend warm milk, but with a twist, sometimes spiked with a dash of nutmeg or even a hint of brandy. You picture a sleepy bohemian sipping this brew in a dimly lit parlor, hoping for a dreamy night. Then there's the milquetoast diet, bread soaked in warm milk, sometimes sweetened, served to soothe the stomach and calm nerves. It sounds bland but comforting. Food as gentle medicine. You imagine yourself eating it reluctantly but feeling slightly better. Surprisingly, some Victorians swear by puffed rice and oatmeal as sleep enhancers. Their slow digestion supposedly promotes calm and prevents restless nights. You think about how far oatmeal has come, now a trendy health food rather than just the porridge of sleepy times. You discover that avoidance of stimulants like coffee and tea in the evening is hotly debated. Some doctors condemn the coffee habit as a prime culprit for insomnia, while others argue its effects are overblown. You smile knowing this argument is alive and well today. Oddly, you find references to soporific wines and tonics, alcoholic beverages infused with herbs meant to induce sleep. It sounds like the Victorian equivalent of a nightcap, but with more science-y intentions and less falling asleep on the couch. There's also a curious suggestion to eat fresh fruits, especially bananas, for their potassium and magnesium content, which supposedly relax muscles and nerves. You raise an eyebrow, wondering if this is the earliest endorsement of the modern banana before bed trend. You find a few recipes involving lettuce in unexpected ways, not just as soup, but as a salad ingredient mixed with calming herbs, or even baked into pies. The idea that this humble leafy green might hold the key to restful nights makes you grin. Dietary advice extends beyond what you eat to when you eat. Early dinners, sometimes as early as 5 p.m., are recommended to give the body time to digest before sleep. You think about your own late-night snacks and the toll they might take. You also discover the Victorian distrust of heavy, spicy, or greasy foods before bed, believed to stimulate the digestive system and keep the mind alert. You wince, recalling your last late-night pizza binge. Historians still argue whether these dietary prescriptions were based on solid science or simply cultural trends. Regardless, the emphasis on food as medicine resonates through time. You decide to prepare a small lettuce soup tonight, not just for tradition, but as a gentle experiment. You savor its mild flavor, the way it warms your insides and seems to whisper, "Rest now." You lie down, feeling a curious blend of science, superstition, and hope swirling inside you. Sleep might still be elusive, but at least you're armed with a spoonful of Victorian wisdom. You find yourself stepping into the realm of Victorian sleeping environments, the spaces where the battle for restful nights plays out. Sleep, it seems, is as much about the room as it is about the mind or medicine. Victorian bedrooms were often small, cluttered spaces filled with heavy furniture, thick drapes, and elaborate wallpaper. You imagine trying to fall asleep in a room that feels more like a boutique museum than a sanctuary. The layers of fabric and ornate decorations might be charming by day, but at night they trap heat and block fresh air. The era is famous for its obsession with fresh air therapy. You read about open windows, strategically placed ventilation slits, and even outdoor sleeping porches. People believed that stale, stuffy air was a major culprit behind sleeplessness and poor health. You think about your own tendency to keep windows shut tight and wonder if your air conditioning is helping or hurting. Then there's the bed itself. A Victorian bed was a fortress of heavy oak, plush mattresses stuffed with horsehair, and towering canopies often draped with curtains to keep out drafts and prying eyes. The bed is both a cozy nest and a suffocating prison, depending on the season. You discover the ritual of changing bed linens was surprisingly important. Clean, fresh sheets were thought to promote comfort and prevent night sweats and night chills. You picture the tedious chore of washing and airing out sheets in a time before modern washing machines, which must have made crisp linens a luxury. The use of heated bricks or bottles, sometimes wrapped in cloth and placed at the foot of the bed, was common to keep toes toasty during chilly nights. You smile, recalling your own electric blanket's gentle hum, a modern echo of this humble tradition. Candles and oil lamps provided a flickering, uneven light that both soothed and unsettled. You learned that some Victorian insomnia sufferers blamed their bedroom lighting for disrupting sleep cycles. You imagine trying to read by candlelight, the shadows dancing on wallpaper patterns, making your brain work overtime. Curiously, you find accounts of Victorian night guards, people who stayed awake to watch over others in the house, sometimes passing the time with quiet conversation or reading. The presence of another awake person was thought to soothe anxiety and loneliness. It's a reminder that sleep is as much a social experience as a private one. You also come across the use of blackout curtains and heavy drapes to keep out street lamps and moonlight, allowing for uninterrupted darkness. You realize that even before electricity, urban nights were noisy and bright, a challenge for anyone trying to rest. Historians still argue how much environmental factors contributed to Victorian insomnia versus psychological or medical causes. You suspect it was a messy mix of all of them. You close your eyes tonight, picturing yourself wrapped in layers of linen and lavender, the window cracked just enough to let in the night air. Maybe, just maybe, the right room is the first step towards sweet sleep. You drift further into the intricate tapestry of Victorian social attitudes towards sleep and rest, how culture, class, and daily life shaped who got to sleep well and who didn't. Sleep, it turns out, was more than a biological necessity. It was a marker of status and morality. For the wealthy Victorian elite, sleep was often seen as a luxury, a reward for virtuous living. The well-to-do could afford spacious bedrooms, personal servants to prepare warm baths and herbal teas, and even special sleeping chambers designed purely for rest. You picture aristocrats slipping away from their hectic social calendars into quiet candle-lit rooms scented with lavender and rose. But for the working class, sleep was a far more elusive prize. You learn about cramped, noisy living quarters shared by multiple family members, thin mattresses on hard boards, and long working hours that left little time for rest. The factory whistle and street noise invaded their nights. You can almost feel the exhaustion pressing down like a heavy blanket. This disparity in sleep quality mirrors the Victorian obsession with morality and industriousness. Rest was sometimes viewed with suspicion as a potential sign of laziness or weakness. Early to bed and early to rise was more than advice. It was a social imperative. You imagine the guilt felt by those lying awake in the dark, their minds racing with worries about work, bills, and survival. There's also the curious Victorian belief that too much sleep could be dangerous. Sleeping beyond a reasonable amount was thought to invite illness or moral decay. You raise an eyebrow, wondering if some people forced themselves awake just to avoid the stigma. Victorian literature and art reflect these attitudes vividly. You think of Dickensian characters whose lives are marked by exhaustion or sleepless nights caused by social pressures. Sleep often symbolizes innocence lost or mental turmoil. Interestingly, you find that naps and siestas weren't common in Britain, unlike other cultures. Sleep was concentrated into a single block at night, and daytime rest was often frowned upon as idle behavior. You consider how different your own habits are, with a quick afternoon nap sometimes saving the day. The role of gender in sleep habits also emerges. Women, especially middle and upper class ladies, were often encouraged to rest more and were seen as more prone to nervous disorders that disrupted sleep. Men, by contrast, were expected to endure long hours and suppress weakness. You find this distinction both fascinating and frustrating. Historians still argue whether these social attitudes helped or hindered the fight against insomnia. Did moral judgment make sleeplessness worse by adding shame, or did it motivate reforms in working conditions and healthcare? You lie back, pondering your own relationship with sleep and society's expectations. Maybe you think sleep is as much about peace with yourself as it is about biology or culture. And with that, you begin to drift, the weight of Victorian nights giving way to your own. Your journey now takes you into the world of Victorian medical theories about sleep and insomnia, where science and guesswork intertwine in a haze of curiosity and confusion. The Victorians were pioneers in many fields, but sleep remained a mystery wrapped in layers of competing ideas. Doctors of the time often framed insomnia as a symptom of a condition they called nervous exhaustion, a catch-all diagnosis for stress, anxiety, or overwork. You can almost picture a weary patient being told to rest more while their doctor scribbles notes about the state of their nerves. The emerging field of neurology starts to influence sleep science. Researchers hypothesize about the brain's role in sleep regulation, though they lack the tools to see the processes clearly. The concept of a sleep center in the brain is debated. Some believe it exists, others are skeptical. Historians still argue whether these early ideas paved the way for modern sleep science or simply muddled the picture. You discover that circadian rhythms aren't well understood yet. Instead, doctors focus on humors, ancient beliefs about bodily fluids, thinking that an imbalance might disrupt sleep. Treatments aim to restore balance with bleeding, purging, or herbal remedies. You shudder but acknowledge this was state-of-the-art medicine for its day. One Victorian theory suggests that overstimulation of the senses, especially in the evening, disrupts sleep. This leads to advice to avoid bright lights, loud noises, and even mental excitement before bed. A surprisingly modern insight. You nod knowingly, remembering your own struggles scrolling through your phone late at night. There's also attention to the role of the digestive system in sleep health. Some doctors argue that indigestion and acid reflux cause restless nights, a notion supported by dietary prescriptions you've already encountered. You feel grateful for your modern antacids. Victorians experiment with hydrotherapy, using water treatments to calm the nervous system and promote sleep. Cold baths, warm wraps, and even jet sprays are prescribed. You imagine stepping into a spa from a Sherlock Holmes story, hoping for miraculous relief. Sleep studies are mostly anecdotal, based on patient reports rather than scientific measurement. You think about how far sleep research has come with EEGs and polysomnography. The era also sees the rise of asylums and sanatoriums where patients with severe insomnia or nervous disorders are treated with rest cures, isolation, and sometimes questionable therapies. You recall how Charlotte Perkins Gilman's famous story, The Yellow Wallpaper, critiques such treatment. You realize Victorian medicine wrestled with sleep as a symptom and a disease, a puzzle with pieces missing. As you prepare to close your eyes, you appreciate the courage of those Victorian patients and doctors, grappling with a problem still vexing us today. Sleep remains a frontier, both then and now, waiting for the next breakthrough. Now, as you slip deeper into the Victorian night, you explore the role of mental health and psychology in Victorian insomnia, a topic both delicate and surprisingly modern in its concerns. You realize that sleeplessness was often tied to the restless mind, tangled emotions, and the social pressures bearing down on the individual. Victorians were beginning to understand the connection between stress and sleep, even if they called it by different names. Terms like nervousness, hysteria, and melancholia are peppered throughout medical texts, sometimes diagnosed as the root causes of restless nights. You feel a pang of empathy, recognizing how those words mask very real emotional pain. You read about the rise of early psychotherapy, where patients would be encouraged to talk about their fears and worries as part of treatment. This was revolutionary for its time, breaking away from purely physical remedies toward mind-centered healing. You imagine Victorian parlors hosting earnest conversations illuminated by lamplight. An interesting quirk is the belief that too much intellectual stimulation, reading challenging books, engaging in lively debates, or intense emotional experiences could sabotage sleep. You smirk, knowing how often your own brain refuses to shut off after a late-night scroll through complicated threads. Victorian writers often depict insomnia as a form of existential torment. You recall the poetic descriptions of sleepless nights filled with brooding thoughts, regrets, and the haunting sense of isolation. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was a surrender that some feared or resisted. The era also wrestled with the idea that women's mental health issues, then often labeled hysteria, were linked to disrupted sleep patterns. You find yourself torn between recognizing the gender biases and appreciating the early attempts to take these issues seriously. You discover that Victorian doctors sometimes prescribed rest cures involving complete isolation from work and stimulation, but these often worsened conditions, leading to further despair and sleeplessness. The tragic story of poetess Elizabeth Barrett Browning's insomnia and anxiety comes to mind. Historians still argue how much Victorian mental health theories helped or harmed insomnia sufferers. Did they open the door to understanding or reinforce damaging stereotypes? You decide it was a bit of both, as so often happens in the history of medicine. You reflect on your own mind's nightly dance, sometimes peaceful, sometimes wild, realizing the mind's role in sleep is timeless and complex. Tonight you try a small mental ritual, a few slow breaths and gentle self-talk, hoping to quiet the chattering mind. And with that, the Victorian night seems a little less lonely. You now delve into the fascinating world of Victorian herbal remedies for sleep, where gardens and apothecaries provided a pharmacy of natural solutions, both gentle and potent. The Victorians turned to plants as allies in their nightly battle against insomnia, blending tradition with emerging botanical knowledge. Lavender stands out as the quintessential sleep herb. Its soft purple flowers and calming scent were staples in sachets, pillows, and oils. You imagine the subtle fragrance weaving through a quiet bedroom, coaxing your eyelids to droop. Lavender's reputation as a sleep aid hasn't faded with time. In fact, it's one of the few Victorian remedies that still feels right. Valerian root is another star of the herbal arsenal, notorious for its pungent smell but praised for its sedative effects. Victorian herbals describe tinctures and teas brewed from valerian, often combined with hops or chamomile to soften the harshness. You wince at the thought of its earthy aroma but can appreciate its calming power. Chamomile, with its gentle floral notes, was drunk widely as a bedtime tea. You smile, thinking of the modern chamomile tea bags still cradled by insomniacs everywhere. The Victorians took it seriously, not just as a drink but as a soothing ritual. Hops, yes, the very same hops that make beer bitter, were valued for their sedative qualities. You find references to hop pillows, small sachets placed under the head to release calming scents. You picture a Victorian sleeper inhaling this herbal bouquet, drifting off without the buzz of ale. You also encounter less familiar herbs like passion flower and skullcap, touted for their nerve-calming properties. The language around these plants is almost poetic, describing their ability to still the troubled spirit and quiet the restless heart. You're tempted to try some yourself. Interestingly, Victorian herbalists warn against overuse or mixing of remedies, cautioning that some combinations could cause grogginess or worse. You're reminded of today's warnings on herbal supplements. Nature is gentle but not always harmless. The herbal approach was more than just chemistry. It was a ritual of preparation, scent, and warmth, engaging the senses and creating a sense of safety before sleep. You imagine the Victorian bedtime scene: a steaming cup of herbal tea, the soft glow of a lamp, and the quiet anticipation of rest. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these herbal remedies, given the placebo effect and the lack of controlled studies at the time. But you realize that for many, the ritual and belief in these plants were as soothing as the remedies themselves. You sip your imaginary cup of chamomile, letting the Victorian garden's gentle wisdom wrap around you, a fragrant lullaby for the mind and body. And with that, you slip deeper into the calm. Now, your thoughts wander toward the curious role of Victorian technology and inventions aimed at aiding sleep, where innovation meets whimsy and sometimes outright quirkiness. The Victorian era, a hotbed of invention, didn't ignore the challenge of sleeplessness. You discover that early versions of the white noise machine were conceptualized, not quite as machines, but as devices designed to produce soothing sounds to mask disruptive noises. Some inventors experimented with mechanical fans and water features that mimicked gentle rain or wind. You imagine a gentle hum lulling a restless Victorian to sleep, though the contraptions were often bulky and imperfect. Gas lighting in homes introduced a new set of sleep challenges, but also possibilities. The idea of adjustable lighting to mimic sunset was floated, with dimmers and shaded lamps intended to signal the body that night was near. It's a primitive precursor to today's smart lights. You chuckle, picturing Victorian gentlemen fumbling with early dimmer switches. You find references to specialized beds and mattresses, adjustable, spring-loaded, or padded with new materials like coir or horsehair blends. Some even incorporated metal springs for better support, revolutionary at the time. Comfort was evolving, though sometimes these inventions led to squeaky nights. Then there's the quirky world of sleep masks and eye covers, not just simple cloths, but elaborately embroidered pieces intended to block light and encourage dreams. You imagine a Victorian lady donning a silk eye mask, a fashion statement and sleep aid rolled into one. The alarm clock as we know it was also emerging, with mechanical versions becoming household items. But these clocks sometimes inspired anxiety, the fear of abrupt awakenings and the stress of rigid schedules. The Victorian concept of a wakeful night could be both feared and monitored. You stumble upon references to music boxes and mechanical lullabies, devices designed to play soft melodies as people drifted off. Music was believed to calm nerves and ease the transition to sleep. You hum a tune in your head, feeling the gentle pull of nostalgia. Even the humble bed warmer, a metal pan filled with hot coals or stones, was a kind of technology to combat cold nights, warming the bed before sleep, a comfort against drafts. You can almost feel the heat radiating through the linens. Historians still argue how effective these inventions really were and whether they addressed the root causes of insomnia or merely soothed symptoms. You suspect a bit of both and a lot of hopeful human ingenuity. As you settle in for your own night, you feel grateful for the blend of science, art, and whimsy that has shaped how we chase sleep. And with that, the steady tick of a Victorian clock accompanies you toward rest. Your thoughts now turn to the darker side of Victorian sleep remedies, the rise of opiates and patent medicines that promised rest but often delivered dependency and despair. The Victorian cure for sleeplessness wasn't always lettuce soup. Sometimes it was a spoonful of laudanum or a mysterious tonic sold in brightly colored bottles. You learn that laudanum, a tincture of opium mixed with alcohol, was widely prescribed for insomnia, anxiety, and a host of other ailments. It was praised for its calming effects, but also feared for its addictive potential. You imagine a Victorian mother quietly dosing her child with laudanum to quiet restless nights, unaware of the risks involved. Patent medicines, over-the-counter concoctions marketed with grand claims, were the Wild West of sleep aids. You read about tonics claiming to banish insomnia, quiet the nerves, or bring restful slumber, often containing secret blends of alcohol, opiates, and herbal extracts. You picture a cluttered apothecary's shelf glittering with promise and danger. The lack of regulation meant anyone could sell these remedies, and many fell prey to over-medication, worsening their insomnia or developing dependencies. You think about how this echoes modern struggles with sleep pills and sedatives. There's also mention of chloral hydrate, introduced in the late 19th century as a supposedly safer alternative to opiates. It became popular among the upper classes, but carried risks of overdose and side effects. The era was a testing ground for many chemicals we now approach with caution. You find accounts of Victorian doctors warning patients about the dangers, but often caught between compassion and the lack of better options. Sometimes, the only way to find sleep was to numb the senses. You stumble upon stories of famous Victorians whose insomnia led them to opiate use, adding a tragic note to the narrative. The fine line between cure and curse is stark. Historians still argue the impact of these medicines on public health and whether the Victorian reliance on chemical sleep aids delayed the development of safer, more effective treatments. You shudder at the thought, but acknowledge the desperation that drives people to seek rest at any cost. Tonight, as you close your eyes, you think about how far we've come and how some battles remain. You drift now toward the fascinating intersection of Victorian spirituality, superstition, and sleep practices, where science, religion, and folklore dance together in an uneasy embrace. The Victorians believed that sleep was not only a physical state, but a spiritual journey, vulnerable to forces beyond human control. You discover that many Victorians feared nightmares and sleep paralysis, often attributing them to malevolent spirits, demons, or restless souls. You imagine the terror of waking unable to move, convinced a ghost is pressing on your chest, a phenomenon still reported today and wrapped in myth. There were widespread beliefs in protective charms and rituals to guard against bad dreams. You read about placing holy water, crucifixes, or herbs like rue and vervain near the bed to ward off evil spirits. You picture a bedside shrine flickering with candlelight, part comfort, part superstition. Dreams themselves were seen as messages from the divine or the subconscious. Victorian dream dictionaries flourished, interpreting symbols from snakes to falling teeth as omens. You chuckle, recalling your own bizarre dreams and wondering what a Victorian might say about them. Sleep was sometimes disrupted by fears of witches or curses, especially in rural areas where folklore ran deep. You imagine villagers whispering about a cursed sleeper or a soul trapped between worlds. You learn that Victorian spiritualism, with seances and mediums, was partly driven by a fascination with the afterlife and the boundary between waking and sleeping states. Communicating with spirits was thought to offer comfort or answers, but also risked disturbing the fragile peace needed for rest. Interestingly, you find that some Victorian doctors incorporated spiritual advice into their treatments, recommending prayer, meditation, or attendance at religious services to soothe troubled minds. Historians still debate how much superstition hindered or helped Victorian insomnia sufferers. Did belief in protective rituals provide psychological comfort, or did it amplify anxiety? You find yourself wondering about the blend of rationality and mysticism in our own modern approach to sleep. As you settle down tonight, you imagine a flickering candle casting shadows on the wall, the gentle murmur of a prayer, or an old lullaby floating in the air. Sleep in any century is a delicate balance between body, mind, and something just beyond. You feel yourself sinking into that peaceful unknown. Your journey now brings you to the role of Victorian diet and nutrition in promoting sleep, an area where food was both medicine and ritual. You discover that what Victorians ate, especially in the evening, was believed to directly influence their ability to drift off. You recall from earlier sections the curious lettuce soup remedy, but here you dig deeper into the broader Victorian ideas about diet and rest. Heavy, rich dinners late at night were thought to disrupt sleep, causing indigestion or heated blood. You imagine a gentleman reluctantly skipping his usual second helping of roast beef, fearing the consequences come bedtime. Victorians were encouraged to favor light, bland foods in the evening, porridge, broth, boiled vegetables, meals designed to soothe the stomach and calm the nerves. The idea that the digestive system could disturb sleep was surprisingly accurate, if sometimes exaggerated. You find references to specific sleep foods. Milk, honey, and even almonds were recommended for their calming properties. Warm milk, often served with a touch of nutmeg or cinnamon, was a staple bedtime drink believed to nourish and relax simultaneously. You think about your own nighttime habits and smile. Alcohol's role was complex. Small amounts of wine or beer were sometimes seen as sleep aids, but overindulgence was known to cause restless nights. Victorian temperance movements pushed against heavy drinking, linking it to poor sleep and moral decay. There was also a belief in balancing the four humors through diet. Too much acidity or spice was thought to inflame the system and hinder rest. You raise an eyebrow at this ancient framework, but appreciate the focus on diet's impact. You learn that food preparation and timing mattered. Dining earlier in the evening gave the body time to digest before bed. This contrasts with some modern cultures where late meals are common. Historians still argue how much Victorian dietary advice was based on science versus social norms, but the connection between food and sleep is a thread running through history. You imagine the quiet ritual of preparing a simple supper, the smell of simmering broth, the warmth of a steaming cup, and the gentle closing of the day. Tonight, you consider your own last meal before bed and how it might shape your dreams. You settle in, nourished body and mind, ready to surrender to rest. Your final stop in the Victorian sleep journey leads you to the cultural legacy and influence of these restless nights, where the echoes of Victorian insomnia still ripple through our modern lives. You realize that the Victorian cure for sleeplessness was more than just lettuce soup or laudanum. It was a window into how humans have long struggled to master sleep. You recall the rise of bedtime rituals, many Victorian-inspired, that persist today: warm drinks, dim lighting, calming scents, and the careful avoidance of overstimulation. These habits are whispers from a time when science was still finding its footing, and comfort often came from tradition and routine. The Victorian fascination with sleep hygiene, even if the term didn't exist, laid groundwork for contemporary sleep medicine. You think of the importance of a dark, quiet room, a comfortable bed, and a predictable schedule, all themes emerging in the 19th century. You also see how Victorian anxieties about the nervous system and mental health echo in today's discussions about stress and insomnia. The Victorian era's blending of mind, body, and environment in treating sleeplessness feels remarkably modern. Yet, you're reminded of the dangers, how reliance on chemical aids like opiates has parallels in today's pharmaceutical landscape. History offers cautionary tales about chasing sleep at any cost. You reflect on the quirky, tender, and sometimes desperate measures Victorians took. Lettuce soup, herbal pillows, steam baths, and spiritual charms. Each reveals a human yearning for rest, peace, and relief from the night's silence. Historians still argue about the true efficacy of many Victorian remedies, but their legacy lives on in how we approach sleep as a vital part of health and well-being. As you drift toward your own night's rest, you feel connected across time to those who, centuries ago, fought the same battle between wakefulness and sleep. Their stories soothe you, a gentle reminder that you are not alone in the quiet dark. And with that, you close your eyes, wrapped in the comfort of history and the promise of dreams. Now, as your breathing slows and your mind softens, imagine the gentle rustle of a velvet curtain drawn closed, the faint flicker of candlelight fading into shadows. Feel the calm spreading through your body, like a warm, slow wave washing over every muscle, every thought. The past and present blend softly, and the restless world quiets around you. You are safe here, cradled in the collective memory of those who sought peace in the night's embrace. No need to hurry or wrestle with wakefulness. Let the gentle rhythm of sleep guide you now, drifting farther from worry, closer to stillness. Rest is a gift, a delicate bloom unfolding in the darkness. Breathe in softly, breathe out slowly, and let yourself float into the quiet mystery of sleep. Good night, dear traveler. May your dreams be sweet and your rest deep.